Well, I gotta say, I'm very happy, but this is the first time we're recording that I've got my official signed Roger Stone in front of me as like a token of good luck that I can occasionally rub.
That's right. That's right. I'm also rubbing my Roger Stone for good luck and good tidings in the new year.
I don't want to like ruin this, but I will because it's like it's really funny. I'm waiting for a present for you guys that's coming from eBay. I'll just tell you because it's fucking hilarious.
Is it more Roger Stones?
No. It is like a legitimate relic of a different time, and this is something that I had. I'll tell you what it is. It is an Enron branded Beanie Baby.
Oh yes.
Enron branded Beanie Baby.
I love it.
So I've got it off eBay. There was a set of 2, and the reason was like I hope at some point we can like do an episode on Enron or maybe like a soon to be released Patreon episode about like specifically about it. But in 2004 or maybe 2005, when I was a house painter in the summertime, I needed like a hat. I was like, well, I want to get something like slightly countercultural or something, whatever. So I went on eBay and got a Enron hat, and like that was like what I wore. And so I've just been like so fascinated with like corporate swag and like I just think about how many like, you know, fucking Arthur Anderson tote bags are just like floating in the Pacific right now or something. And so it's just like fascinating that there's these like pieces of history that you can like actually touch.
Yeah, there was a time about a year ago, I remember I was browsing eBay. I was trying to pick up some Manafort Black and Stone swag. So I was like trying to see if I could get anything from that company. I found some kind of like memo pad or something that had like the company name on the ledger or whatever.
The Beanie Baby though, what a snapshot in time. That's incredible, both aspects of it.
When did the Beanie Baby come out? Because I'm rather hesitant to admit that I was pretty into Beanie Babies in the 90s when I was a kid. And I'm not aware of the Enron Beanie Baby.
Don't worry about being into Beanie Babies. It's like, everybody wore bell bottoms in like the early 70s.
Yeah, go ahead, cover your tracks, you fiends.
I'm trying to help Chris out. I saw that recently. Like there was that picture of a divorce court in like the late 90s, and it's to a man and woman going through their Beanie Baby collection in the front of a courthouse, like in front of the judge, like one by one, just a mountain of Beanie Babies.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be the episode thumbnail.
That's wild.
That was gonna be Dennis Prager's dumb face.
I just remember everyone trying to collect them because they were like, well, these are gonna accrue in value over the years. You're gonna want these down the line.
Jesus.
Yeah, those and Pokemon cards. Those were my 2 big investments when I was a kid.
We're just like dying to recreate the Dutch tulip bubble.
I always like to think about these weird transient ephemeral pieces of culture like that, like a Enron Beanie Baby, as being the one thing that some scavenger in like the future wasteland will come upon when they're looking desperately for like a canned food or fresh water, and they'll like dig into some like old administrative building like for days searching for some kind of bit of knowledge that they can bring to the past to defeat like the giant insects, and they find the fucking Beanie Baby in my clutches as I die.
Well, same with like they'll talk about like future archaeologists or anthropologists like will find this and it'll represent humanity. And honestly, if they found an Enron Beanie Baby, I think that would do the trick, right? Like that would be pretty good.
Yeah.
It's gonna be so dumb. It's gonna be so dumb when alien archaeologists like dig through our deadened planet and they find this shit.
Or like that like hole in the desert out in New Mexico or something that's filled with like thousands of copies of the E.T. the Extraterrestrial Atari game. You familiar with that?
Oh my God.
Is that real?
That's a real. I believe it was the E.T. game. Maybe the Donkey Kong game. No, I think it was the E.T. game, the Atari game from the 80s. They released this game, and it was like a big promotional crossover, obviously, you know, with the film company, with Lucasfilms or whatever, and then it ended up like, or Spielberg or whatever, and it ended up being like terribly reviewed, poor selling game, and they had all this leftover excess product, and they just like dumped it in a big fucking hole and buried it out in the middle of the desert. They made a documentary about it. It's pretty interesting.
Dude, aside from everything that we've like studied for this episode, this is one of the things that just like made it in that fucking ruined in my mind and turned it to oatmeal, which is like apparently when Elon Musk shot the Tesla Roadster into space,
yes,
they didn't sterilize it for
sanitize
bacteria. So
they could have potentially ruined, like, if they had actually made it to Mars, they could have ruined, like, you know, the rest of, you know, scientific exploration of that planet for all of history.
They said the guy from the Office of Planetary Protection from NASA said that they didn't sterilize it, and it may bring with it what may be the largest load of earthly bacteria to ever enter space.
Oh, that makes me so fucking angry. What a big giant dummy.
Which is fucking hilarious too, because it goes to show the hubris, and I don't want to be too much of a conspiracy theorist, but I will. Which is that, like,
he intentionally germed space.
Jeff, no,
Is that your
even
theory?
dumber than that.
He's trying
Jeff
to
Bezos.
That's giving him too much credit, man.
He's trying to pre-poison space.
This is
It's
how
like
dumb
a
they are.
dog pissing on a fire hydrant.
Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk recognize like the future demise of Earth if capitalism continues to have its way, and so they're trying desperately to like terrestrialize Mars and get off with like SpaceX and Blue Origin, whatever the fuck it is. And I would love if they destroyed our entire sister planet for a fucking advertisement. If this is the end of civilization, that's fine, as long as like the people that did it get fucked in the end. I'm fine with that.
This was just making me think, because I was watching some PragerU videos in preparation for today's episode, and Carrie came in at one point and she was like, "What the fuck are you watching?" Like, what? She could hear it from the other room, and it was one of the episodes was why you should love fossil fuels, and that's just the name of it, and the premise of it, like the starting off of it is like a thought experiment of like what would happen if you brought somebody back from 300 years ago at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution in a time machine and brought them to today. And she really angrily just said, like, they would die immediately from all the new germs. If not, bring new germs to them. It's a stupid thought experiment. Just instantly, we'd all be wiped out by some old strain of, like, the Black Death or something.
God, that's such a good point, and kind of makes me now see all time travel science fiction in a different way.
Just choking to death on ancient bacteria.
I thought for a second you were going to say, oh, that actually changed my mind and made me think maybe these PragerU videos aren't particularly well thought out.
But you repeat yourself.
You know, up until now, I've been kind of on the fence. But I think y'all walked me back from the edge.
The only virus that's occurred is the virus of now infecting our minds with PragerU videos. You've increased the N to a total of 4 between the 4 of us of just completely infected contagion hosts.
Honestly, I'm like addicted to them. I think that like I've only scratched the surface of, you know, the number of these videos I'm going to watch, you know, in preparation for the show. Like I've only just begun.
This is incredible news to me because I don't have enough people to share, because I just watch this shit constantly, and I always need to I'm looking around like, are you listening to this shit? And no one else is listening to it.
Oh, well, for the thousands of people that are going to listen to this episode, we're doing an extremely successful job of poisoning everybody along with us.
There you go.
Yeah, no, this is an extremely efficient poisoning of the contagion.
If there's one takeaway, please subscribe to Dennis Prager online. Please watch his new episodes.
I was gonna say we watched it, so you don't have to.
But you also have to.
Also do it so you can laugh your asses off.
Get an ad blocker and then sure.
Buy a cheap keyboard so that you can fucking smash it when you are in the middle of a video, because you're gonna want to.
Were you saying that they gave you a nightmare last night, Dwight?
I don't remember what it was, but it was. I think it was just like the general poisoning of my mind after like watching these before bed for the last like 3 nights in a row.
Did you picture like a perfect blue background and some like featureless figures appearing to lecture
Was Dinesh D'Souza narrating your dream?
I mean, that's happened for the better part of a decade. So I just have him on a loop.
I cannot think of a more horrifying nightmare.
It's him on a loop saying the Democrats are the real racists.
It could even be like a great dream where like amazing things are happening, but if Dinesh D'Souza was narrating it, it would be automatically the worst nightmare.
And no matter what, the conclusion of it always is the Democrats are the real fascists.
Yeah, of course.
That's always where the dream concludes.
The whole parasocial, like, because I haven't met any of these people in person, but I did have the experience of like watching their content like day in, day out for months and months and months on end. And so it was like a very weird relationship where obviously like I think they're all awful, but I also felt like I knew them really intimately. And then like my research got released and suddenly they were all like live streaming about me and tweeting at me, and it was the biggest like parasocial mindfuck. Like it just suddenly like the veil gets, or you know, the separation gets removed or whatever. There's like a level of safety when you're watching it anonymously, right? Like you can judge, and then the minute that you're actually either face to face or like known to them, then the whole dynamic just shifts.
That is fucking wild.
It was so surreal. Yeah.
Who was the journalist that was like had that tweet with her like having a drink with Richard Spencer?
Oh, the one that did a
yeah.
selfie.
Yeah.
A selfie with Richard Spencer. What's her name? Julia Eoff, I think.
Yeah, that's the one.
Eoff.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I
the
don't know how
one.
you pronounce her last name, but
I don't know. Like, I think about this a lot. Like, you know, especially when I reflect on like thinking of if when you meet somebody like this, what do you do? Like, I saw Anthony Scaramucci walking down the street one day in New York.
There's nothing you could do to him at this point.
That's true. I know we've talked about this on the show before, but the first thing I thought, I was like, who's this spiffed up short motherfucker? And then and then I was like, fuck, that's Mooch. And I was like, do you just scream an expletive? Like, that's not clever. Like, do you record it? Because like, don't scream at some fucking fascist facilitator and not at least get some good content out of it.
The loony left won't let me walk down the sidewalk in peace.
Yeah, exactly.
the answer is you carry a milkshake on you at all times, just in case this exact scenario takes place.
Well, what this reminds me of, and there was a weird experience I had, I guess back in the spring. Remember when Mike Cernovich started like getting into that whole like fashion? He wanted to be like a fashion icon or like a fashion advice type guy. Like,
I forgot about that. Oh my god.
yeah, like somebody made a group DM on Twitter and they called it Mindset and Fashion and like added him to it, and it was like him and then me and a bunch of like online leftists, right? And like what was weird was that he started replying, and he started like he really wanted to talk. Like he was like telling us about his workout and about like fashion and like it was like and like his like what he was cooking, and he was like, oh, let's start a book club together. And he was like, it was really weird because he was like, it was weird to get that guy, a kind of guy like that, like who I know is monstrous, you know what I'm saying? But like to get him in that kind of situation where you're talking to him and to discover that he has the ability to be rather disarming, you know what I'm saying? And I can see how he is a charismatic figure to some people who, you know, buy into his bullshit, because like you get in a conversation like that with him, and then like what do you do? What do you say? You know, it was weird, and I just had to leave it.
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's like absolutely the experience of watching that YouTube content is like you can understand why it is effective for people. And so much of that is because they're like talking directly to their audience. They're like going about their daily lives. You really do start to feel like you know them. And like when you just see anyone going about their daily lives, like it's hard not to feel some level of, you know, relating to them or just seeing the humanity in them, right? And so it's an incredibly effective propaganda tactic.
You know, maybe it is these guys, like these kind of Tucker Carlson guys, are more relatable because they aren't like obscenely rich. They're just like grifters struggling underneath the boot of capitalism by just becoming a barnacle of it, right? So they are more like I have nothing in common with Tucker Carlson, who like puts on a hairnet every night to preserve his beautiful fucking Wake Forest haircut. And like under silk sheets and like have, you know, be greeted with a silver tray of like fresh squeezed orange juice and a single daisy in a vase every morning by his valet. Like I have nothing in common with that person. Like that's not my life at all. However, like somebody like Mike Cernovich who's cripplingly insecure is much more
Well, I think it's also there's a thing about presentation, right, that works with both those types of guys, and also kind of sets them apart from the more like visibly ideological, or the ones who have a more expressive, affect when they're presenting or talking. And that's, in part maybe just a personal choice, or genuine personality, but it is also like you said, Becca, like a propaganda tactic, right? Like to present ideas in this sort of palatable form, to be like, see, look, I'm a reasonable person. I go to the grocery store just like you. I just happen to hate, 5-6 of the people on this planet, and this is why. And then you get into that. And I think just to do that little circle back around thing, I think that's right. I've been trying to figure out what the appeal of PragerU is in the lead up to this episode, because there's so much content online that you can find that is just like more entertaining. Like if you're into this politics, right? Like it's vastly more entertaining to watch info. Like it just is, as opposed to this material. But there is, and I did a kind of, very impromptu, unscientific like survey of just asking people online, Twitter followers, like, has anybody at one time been interested in this content, or like have family members or friends or stuff show them this content? And the overwhelming response, and of course this is all anecdotal, but the response seems to be that the draw of this particular style of promoting and presenting right-wing ideas is like, it's done in this very clean, neat style, and it seems reasonable. It always seems to be appealing to some kind of sense of like non-existent but hypothetical, like centrist or on the fence person. Like, here's like a clear presentation of these ideas in a very short form. Nobody's yelling, nobody's angry, nobody's saying anything too outrageous. It's all like euphemistic and, packaged in this common sense sort of way, which again, incidentally, makes it incredibly boring and really funny.
I think that's spot on, though. I think it's strategically boring, right? Because they can say, like, well, first of all, it makes it seem intellectual. It's very much like packaged as this is an educational tool that can incidentally, like, they have a whole video about how, like, oh, you don't need to go to college. Like, college is kind of useless, right? Meanwhile, they're called Prager University. And then also, it presents this facade of being like, so reasonable and logical, and like, listen, this is just the facts, ma'am. Like, no need for the wild emotions of the left. Yeah. They're driven by their emotions. We're just going to educate you.
Cold, hard facts.
Well, to me, it seems like, in watching this content, and I keep seeing, like, a couple times I saw this figure mentioned where they claim that, the majority of their viewers are under the age of 35 or something like that. But it seems to me that this is, like, made specifically for, like, an average age of about 60 to 70. You know what I'm saying? And it's the same with, like, the Turning Point USA content. Like, that is marketed towards, and, like, even though it's, like, ostensibly, like, supposed to be, like, a college age, like, a young person's organization, like the target audience for that is, like, overwhelmingly, like, boomer. Prager University, this seems the same way. Even though they claim that it's to appeal to, a younger audience. That's what they claim.
Well, I mean, first of all, I would say also, like, the demographic info that they're probably pulling from is from, like, YouTube and stuff, and those are always, like, wildly weird.
Yeah, I would like to see the data from Facebook, which is the land of the boomer.
But I did, again, the surprising thing, because that was my instinct as well, which is, even though this has cropped up on my radar a number of times over the last few years, I never gave it too much attention, because I was more interested in general in, like, stuff that I saw as being, like, targeted at, like, young people, and I always figured, just, like, from a cursory glance, without actually watching it, like, oh, this is for, like, older people using the internet. Like, it just seems to have that presentational thing. But, a lot of the anecdotal stuff that got back to me when I asked people was like, no, my, like, college roommate was showing me this. Wow. Like, hey, he was, like, always trying to, like, convert me or be like, hey, take a look at this.
Jesus.
Yeah, because same for me, this is one of those things. It's like, I've been aware of PragerU for several years. It's always sort of been on the periphery, but I don't think I've ever watched the video or ever paid any attention to it at all until this week.
And that's the other thing, right? It's strategically boring. It flies under the radar. I mean, there's a great, I don't know if any of you read the BuzzFeed piece by Joe Bernstein on them, which I think is really good. And he talks about, like, they've kind of flown under the radar in part because they also, like, rarely ever talk about Trump, and they rarely ever jump on the news cycle.
Yes, I did read that, yeah.
It's much more about, like, long-term, like, ideological and, like, meta-politics stuff, right? And for that reason, they can get, like, billions and billions of views and still, like, rarely ever make it to people's conscious closeness unless they're watching it.
Right.
I want to talk quickly about the Trump component there, because it is true, but literally like this week, like right after we started talking about doing this, they put out a video and the name of it was @Real Napoleon Bonaparte. Like that's the name of the video. And I saw that and I was like, I'm gonna fucking watch this. Did you guys see that one?
No.
Okay, so the premise of this video, again, it never mentions Trump at all in the context of the video, but it's obviously about him. Otherwise, they wouldn't make that the title of it. It's like a very like weird, basic history about Napoleon with a bunch of graphics of like, here are all the battles that Napoleon won. And the like conclusion of the video is like, you know, sometimes Napoleon is unfairly compared to 20th century tyrants like Hitler and Stalin. But Napoleon was actually a complicated figure who did a lot of good things and a lot of bad things. So at the end of the day, sometimes history is more nuanced, and you shouldn't just compare the people you don't like to Hitler.
Right.
God, I'm so tired of the left and their baseless attacks on Napoleon.
Everybody knows that you always exile to the South Atlantic a complicated figure.
Yeah. Yeah, the online Twitter mob came for Napoleon, and they'll be coming for you next, okay?
They tried to cancel Napoleon.
But he tweeted through it. He tweeted through it all the way to Waterloo.
Now when I was a young boy, about the age of 5, my teachers taught me I could be the greatest man alive. They told me I could change the world, be whatever I wanted to be. There was no one in the world like me. Every one of us was so unique. I'd not be an average man. No, sir, I'd be no average man. So I had those big dreams.
Welcome back, everybody, to Eat the Rich. This is a show about our political economy, late-stage capitalism, and the millionaires, billionaires, and multinational corporations hell-bent on staving off its death rattle. I'm Dwight, and today we have with us Shane.
Howdy, folks.
We've got Chris.
Hey, Happy New Year.
And we have a PhD researcher of the far right at Stanford University, Becca Lewis, which we're huge fans of. Thank you for joining us, Becca.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
So today we wanted to talk about a guy that, you know, we mentioned a few times in the intro, Dennis Prager. And the reason why this sort of came up in my mind, I was thinking about this, like, as we sort of alluded to, if you're online, which if you're listening to this, you are, I'm sorry to break it to you, you're probably extremely online, you've probably stumbled across PragerU's videos. And that is one of the things we'll get into later. It's a massive amount of marketing that they do. I mean, it could be because of my own poisoned YouTube feed, but I see a PragerU ad every day, pretty much at this point. And, you know, a lot of you are probably smart, discerning, interesting people. Again, that's why you're listening to this. And so you see that, you're like, nope, not for me, and you move on along. We don't do that. We actually stop and we watch this awful things, or at least I do, because I'm a masochist and I hate myself, so I need to look at this content. And so we thought we would give you a little bit of a primer and talk about what is Prager University, who is this guy, and what are they doing all over YouTube. If you could give us a little bit of a primer. I know that you've written on him as well as a number of other figures of the online right, and just give us a sense. What is Prager University?
Yeah, so despite being called Prager University, it is not a university. It's not any kind of accredited program that gives any degrees. It is a complete misnomer. It is essentially just a YouTube channel or a nonprofit that produces YouTube content specifically geared to promote right-wing talking points. But because it's called Prager University, it's meant to kind of present itself as this educational content. So it's bread and butter. They have a bunch of different types of content, but its bread and butter is kind of these 5-minute concise videos on a single topic. And essentially, like, breaking it down point by point why the right-wing interpretation or conservative interpretation of this issue is the correct version. It's run by this guy named Dennis Prager, who I think we'll get into his biography a little bit more in a bit, but he is an Orthodox Jewish conservative radio host who now, of course, has made the transition to YouTube. And there's a ton of other people that come and host each video. So basically, like, every member of the intellectual dark web pretty much has like hosted a video on some topic or another. You have Tucker Carlson has done one, Brett Stevens has done one. Pretty much people from every notable right-wing think tank have hosted them. Despite being pretty dry and boring, they're incredibly, incredibly popular. They have a total of over 3 billion views. And pretty much every video that you look at, one of those 5-minute ones, will have over 1 million individual views. So really kind of upper echelons of political content in terms of their viewership numbers.
But surely, I mean, even though they're not an accredited university, surely the content of the videos is on par with what you might get out of a college semester course, right? I mean, I don't need to take an economics class if I can watch a 5-minute video that explains why progressive income tax is bad, right?
Famous alumnus like Dr. Nick from The Simpsons.
Yeah, as you might expect, the arguments are very reductive and basically walk the line between educational and pure propaganda. They're meant to convert people to right-wing viewpoints or to kind of arm people who are arguing right-wing points with talking points. So you'll get a lot of kind of revisionist or selective history about how it was actually Democrats that owned the slaves without any discussion.
Wait, what?
Dinesh D'Souza was right?
That somehow changes my worldview fundamentally about what the political landscape looks like today.
They never taught me that in high school.
Nobody ever taught me anything in high school.
Well, we've lost Shane to PragerU.
What's interesting to me as well, and that you touched on, like one thing that makes their model so effective is that you've got like the videos themselves are branded with this Prager University names. They've got Dennis Prager's name on them, but the individual videos, like you said, like they're hosted by these people who are already, many of them very famous, very popular in their own rights, already come with this huge built-in audience. So like everybody who's a Jordan Peterson fan is going to go watch the Jordan Peterson PragerU video. Everyone who's a Steven Crowder fan is going to go watch the Steven Crowder video. You know what I'm saying? Believe it or not, Steven Crowder does have fans.
Shane, are you laughing because we have on guests that join because they're fans of the people that they follow on Twitter and they come listen to Eat the Rich?
No, I was laughing about Steven Crowder having any fan base personally, but
I watched one of his last night, man. He is a smug little shit. I hate him so much.
I've watched basically all of the worst that YouTube has to offer, and I find him to be the most difficult YouTuber to watch. Even though he's not like the most, he's not openly white supremacist or any of these things. He's just straight up mean and racist,
Well, and it's also it's not only that, but it's the added element of him, as opposed to some of these other, right-wing personalities or pundits. Like, he first and foremost claims to be a comedian, and he's just so just at a base level unfunny.
Right.
Well, I think something you just brought up is actually kind of key to looking at like why this is something worth studying or examining, right? Which is that a lot of the people who end up on PragerU presenting various different ideas in and of themselves might not be, as we were discussing before, like very extremist ideologically in at least in their presentation, right? It's always presented in this very mild-mannered, calm, facts don't care about your feelings type aesthetic. But as Chris, you pointed out, and as Becca, you've written about, what ends up happening is there becomes this overlapping set of audiences because of the rotation of like adding new people in, right? So people who are subscribed to something that might seem like, predominantly a relatively like moderate or centrist kind of set of viewpoints or presentations may then kind of end up elsewhere online.
Yeah, exactly. Like the flip side of a Jordan Peterson fan going then to watch his video on PragerU is if you kind of frequently watch PragerU videos, you're going to end up getting exposed to a wider range of people. And they do have kind of they have people whose views range within a very narrow scope, but so, for example, like Michelle Malkin is one of the people they've had on, and she recently was on a white nationalist YouTube channel, right? So it's like very easily, if you start kind of following some of these people and where they end up going when they're not on PragerU, you really quickly get into kind of white nationalist, white supremacist spheres.
Yeah, Douglas Murray as well, I believe. He did one on on Islam, Muslim immigration to Europe. And he's notoriously, anti-Muslim and, published in a variety of other places that are explicitly white supremacist.
Well, surely the video that he made was an equal-handed thing about various opinions on immigration, right? I mean...
Just presenting facts. I mean, yeah, that's the other thing is, like, I don't know, this is my own personal thing, and I think I didn't always grapple with this well in my own research, but I think I'm starting to move away from this, thinking about it in terms of, like, people getting radicalized that you're, like, going down a rabbit hole, and more that, like, it's even the people on PragerU, right? Like, Ben Shapiro is on PragerU. Ben Shapiro is openly Islamophobic. Openly homophobic, openly sexist, all of these things that, like, you don't actually need to travel, like, farther to get, like, extremely bigoted content. It's right there.
And again, presentationally, I think one of the other things that I guess has an appeal, but also works for, like, branding is the aesthetic of the videos are all, like, the same, right? And so one of the things that PragerU has an edge on maybe some other content creators, right, is that there's a total, like, aesthetic consistency between videos, and it gives it a veneer of, professionalism. The videos, to me, they reminded me of these videos, and I'm sure I'm going to alienate a bunch of our audience when I say I don't like these, but the Kurzgesagt.
Yes, I do.
You guys know what I'm talking about?
No, I'm not. What is? I'm not familiar with that.
Kurzgesagt it's basically like a nominally apolitical version of PragerU, but you've seen a bunch of these different kinds of content online where they do these like 5 to 10 minute little like think piece things.
Oh yeah, Vox and people like that. They do
exactly,
these,
which have these very simplistic looking graphics, and of course ultimately very simplistic ideas, but it presents it in a way, again, it gives an added edge of, like, I don't know, pseudo-intellectualism, like there'll be like a graph on a PragerU video that will just have no X or Y axis, and it'll just like show something going up, and then, somehow combined with the narration, when it's moving by pretty quickly in a flashy and graphically entertaining way, it sort of like just registers in your mind like, oh, that's really dramatic. I didn't realize, that immigration leads to the decline of Western culture, but it says so in the graph right there. Like that's hard, cold facts, right? And so it also, even though it's presenting itself as this nominally like apolitical or neutral thing, it's highly, highly ideological,
Absolutely.
right? Like what's being presented is not factual information. It's a particular interpretation of things. And very rarely are there any statistics, with the exception of like these hypothetical nonsense things, right? Like, well, if you had 10 apples and your friend had 5 apples, like, who deserves more? That's like fucking totally ridiculous and doesn't reflect anything within the real world.
It's weird because they'll do that thing where it's like, what if that you had a baseball the size, a black hole the size of a baseball that was in your pocket? What would it do to your corpuscular nature?
Yeah.
And then they just start talking about like incinerating cities and like how many people on Earth would die. And we talked about this on another episode too, about like how the problems to a lot of the problems that we have in our societal structure tend to want to be remediated by like technological solutions, when really those obfuscate the fact that there are political problems that need political solutions.
Totally. Yeah, just to give a sense of like some of the titles and how they frame things. Like, I mean, it's so clear from these titles already that they're not going to be objective, but it's like, if you hate Israel, you're no friend of the Jews.
Is that the one that opens with the Italian stuff?
Yes.
Yeah. It's like a picture of like, it's like a bunch of people who are like, we hate Italy, but we don't hate Italians. And it's like, you wouldn't say this about Israel or whatever.
Now
it's
replace that with Israel. Yeah.
Nobody's gonna say they hate Italians, that's for sure.
That reminds me of the one I watched one last night that just infuriated me. It was called I posted about it. I believe the video itself was called "Israel, the World's Most Moral Army." and one of the slides of the slideshow was literally, it just said, "Accidents aren't war crimes."
Oh God.
In line with that, there's one called "Cops Are the Good Guys."
Amazing.
A lot of there's one where they say that every Nobel Peace Prize should go to the U.S. military. But then you get ones that are more strategically framed. So there's this one that's just like, is college worth it? ? Or like, why can't America fill a pothole? Right? These things that like, or a lot of times I've tried to like imitate what like a user searching for different terms would be. And of course, like you can only find out with a limited view because everything's personalized, the results. But like I'll search for a bunch of different terms. And for the longest time, if you search for intersectionality, like one of the first two hits that comes back for me is PragerU video, "What is intersectionality?" And it's Ben Shapiro basically just spreading like it's blatant disinformation. Like I'm gonna go ahead and take a guess he's never read Kimberly Crenshaw. And he basically says, you know, it's the oppression hierarchy, yada yada yada. So it's like if you think about people actually searching out information on YouTube, they have very strategically positioned like what keywords are they using. Like it's search engine optimization essentially, and they have the marketing budget to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think about that a lot, like not just in terms of them, but in general, how one of the, I don't know, double-edged swords of having so much technological infrastructure at everybody's like available fingertips, and especially for younger people, right, is that, you know, places like YouTube do end up being the places where younger people are learning things for the first time, right? And so it becomes like this, it's like literally like a heuristic, right? Like, what do I put into the search engine in order to get a certain thing out, right? And then always on top of that too, like after a certain amount of usage, you start changing how you frame questions when you enter something into a search engine, because you know like what, like how to sort through the algorithm already. But then, you know, you have something like this, which is a highly sophisticated operation and it has a lot of money behind it, which we're going to get into later. But like it is designed, like you're saying, to be the first response, like first responders really, to the variety of questions that, and I think that is sort of maybe answers a little bit of the question that like we had during the intro of the show of like, are young people actually fucking watching these boring ass videos? But like if you are a young person and you're looking for information, you know, and you want something that seems like professional and seems like
it's presented in a way that's serious,
right, and it has a certain authority to it.
Yeah, it's really weird to me how because like Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson walk this line too, and it's really baffling to me how successful they are at it, where they're like the nerdiest motherfuckers ever. Like they just tell lame jokes, like
Awful.
they're like straight up boomer shit, right?
Awful.
And yet they're able to position themselves as like countercultural and cool because they're not the mainstream media, right? And so, I mean, I think there is an element for younger people of like, oh, it's just kind of like my like, you know, cute uncle, but also he has some good points. But still, it's very strange to me that these like very clearly older grifty men are able to resonate with young people. But you know, it's the power of reactionary politics, I guess.
Yeah, maybe we should get into a little bit about his biography. I mean, if only there was some concise 5-minute rundown of what Dennis Prager's life was like that enabled him to become such a genius. You know, that would be really helpful. Oh wait, what's this that's popped up in my YouTube queue? Who is Dennis Prager?
Oh God.
What is the source of this video? I trust this to be, totally unbiased.
Well, it's from the neutral, non-profit organization, PragerU.
Right.
So presumably they're going to have an even balance.
So we should try to cut it in right here.
Who is Dennis Prager? And why do so many people love him? As the producer of the Dennis Prager radio show and the co-founder and executive director of Prager University, I have given this second question a lot of thought. Here is my answer. Luck. Unadulterated. Good fortune. Or it could be this. Through his radio show, his writing, and now PragerU, he changes the way you live. For the better. He makes you a better person, a better father, a better son, a better mother, a better daughter. Name another public figure who does that.
It's so good, man. It's so good. I don't know if have any of you guys have you seen the movie Sleeper by Woody Allen?
Yeah.
And there's a scene in it where they talk about the leader and how the only like vestige of the leader that they have is the guy's nose, but they like talk about the leader as this like benevolent guy or whatever. That was the feel for me from this dude Allen whatever talking about Dennis Prager.
The feeling that I got from it was I felt like I was watching some sort of like Scientology propaganda video where like it's like one of David Miscavige's acolytes like singing his praises. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah, it's funny how obviously the whipping boy of the online right always, and particularly PragerU, is always like the totalitarian communist regimes of the 20th century. And you have this like video about their founder, which could easily map into some kind of Stalinist cult of personality thing, right? Where it's basically this guy, his upbringing. I mean, do we want to get into it a lot? I mean, he's got the rags to riches story that all of these guys have. That through hard work and benevolent genius, he managed to build up this media empire for himself. He was a radio show host for a long time. I was trying to figure it out. I think his net worth right now is $10 million. It seems low, but considering that the like operating budget for PragerU this year, or rather this past year,
I believe they have a $10 million annual budget. That may be a couple years old.
Well, no, the one for 2019 was 20 million, 22 million. That was what his budget in, and their projected budget for 2020 is $25 million.
Right.
And so that's just the money that's going into there. That's not necessarily his personal funds. I mean, he's written a number of books, including a very humble commentaries on the Bible, which is something that all intellectuals should aspire to do, especially if you're talking about how much you revere it. That's one thing you should do. You should write your own annotated fucking version of it.
I don't get why in the video for the intro video why they said the thing about Brooklyn College.
At the time, though, the future didn't look promising. Dennis's grades were so bad that his only college option was Brooklyn College, simply because Brooklyn would take anybody.
Oh, yeah, they shit on Brooklyn College.
Yeah,
like, fuck
dude.
you. Brooklyn College is great.
It's great. And
Didn't your guy go there? Like,
A, exactly. But B, I thought it was like either it's a dig at Bernie, because Bernie went to Brooklyn College. And
yeah, probably, yeah.
So that's what I
that's
figured.
interesting.
Or it was just like shitting on public education in general, because like shitting on public education would be part of their thing.
That's how I interpreted it. Was like he was so genius that ultimately, like, he was a bad boy. He could only do Brooklyn College, but ultimately he was so smart that he was successful regardless of college being useless.
I mean, that could also be said about many of the boomer generation. That like it all just kind of worked out for them.
Right. I also think my favorite line from the entire thing was the one that calls his parents movie star. What was it? Movie star attractive?
Born in Brooklyn, New York on August 2nd, 1948, he is the second son of Max and Hilda Prager, two worldly Orthodox Jews. Max, a World War II vet, was an accountant, and Hilda, a nursing home administrator. Both were movie star handsome. In fact, if the stars had been differently aligned, Hilda could have been an actress. She had the looks and the personality. Speaking of stars, Dennis's sign is Leo, which makes you want to believe in astrology.
What the fuck was that about?
man.
What
yeah.
the
That
fuck
was so
was that?
Lest you think that this video is just the usual rundown of like the bootstrap story. It has weird details in it, including the fact that his parents are like Hollywood beautiful.
Hot mom. they really drive home his hot mom.
They do.
Which is especially weird because, like, there's no way Dennis Prager doesn't have final cut on all of this stuff.
100%.
Exactly. Yeah, he has like editorial authority over everything.
Right.
It's like to me it reminded me of like the side story for fucking what the fuck was his name in Inglourious Bastards? Who's the double agent? Fucking the Northern Irish guy.
Stiglitz?
No, the Northern Irish guy. Fassbender, yeah. About how he was like, in fact, my brother, whoever the fucking director was of the video, but he was like, he found my brother so handsome he even gave him a close up in the movie. That's what it sounded like to me. It was just like an obviously weird bullshit thing to say, like, my mom was so attractive she could have been a movie star, and they like made a point, and like somebody had to like animate that with like a little gleam in her teeth or something like that.
Yeah.
Very weird.
Yeah. By the way, for all the listeners who have not seen any of us like post pictures of ourselves on Twitter, I also could have been a movie star.
Yes.
I just want to make that absolutely clear.
Same here, and I just want to make it clear that I'm older, so I could have been first. Actually, it would have been me first.
As the senior member of Eat the Rich, I would like to assert that it is me who would have been part of the Gilded Age of cinema.
So I guess I don't know if we want to talk more about his radio stuff in the 80s and some of the books he published in the 80s, but like it seems to me like he is this like very deeply religious person, but it's like it's easy for me to forget sometimes that I'm talking about like I'm reading about somebody who's Jewish, because like he has so many of the like it seems so much in line with like what you think of as like an evangelical Christian type of like his whole view on homosexuality and stuff like that. In fact, there's one thing I took note of here. I don't know if this was an essay or a book, but he wrote in 1990. He wrote something called Judaism, Homosexuality, and Civilization.
Oh dear.
The big three.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
Arguing against normalizing homosexuality in the Jewish community, but then he plots out on some sort of continuum of like what he deems the sexual sins, premarital sex, celibacy, adultery, homosexuality, bestiality, incest. Like he's
very normal of people with healthy relationships to their libido they would write that about.
No.
That's totally normal and fine. I see.
When you have a hot mom and you let everybody know you have a hot mom, you end up having a very normal, healthy, adjusted view about sexuality and everybody else's sexuality.
By the way, too, and in no way this is just like an armchair psychologist thing, but they like totally just sped over the fact that he didn't speak until he was 4 years old.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, very weird.
And then he was like,
too many thoughts. He had too many thoughts.
And then it was like, and as soon as he started, he wouldn't shut up. And I was like, it kind of sounds like this child was traumatized. Like that's definitely a hallmark.
He was stunned. He was stunned by the beauty of his mother for 4 years. He was just unable to speak.
This child was clearly not okay.
But Chris, to your point, like I've thought about that a lot, that it feels like his content is like specifically crafted for an evangelical audience, even
Absolutely.
though he is Orthodox Jewish, because not only the fixation on homosexuality and gender and all of these things, but also abortion is like a huge thing for him, which does not tend to be, as far as I know, in Judaism, even Orthodox Judaism, like as big a deal. So it's same with Ben Shapiro. Like it's two Orthodox Jewish guys who very much, and my colleague Francesca Tripodi wrote like an amazing report that I was rereading before this, because she writes a lot about PragerU. She did this like year-long ethnography of Christian conservative media consumers in Virginia.
I might know some of them.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's Bob.
Go on, sorry.
But it was like the YouTube content that they all loved universally. It was like Ben Shapiro, Dave Rubin, Steven Crowder, and PragerU. Those were like the four big ones.
I mean, I think like the part of the logic there, right? And it seems to be the thing he hitched his career to on early as a writer and a radio host, and then eventually, has translated to this like YouTube world, is the whole like Christian culture war stuff, because he frames like
Judeo-Christian values.
Judeo-Christian values, exactly. Yep. Like this is the cornerstone of Western civilization. These traditional family values, which again are highly like evangelical Protestant versions of these values, and things before he was a hit on YouTube when he was a radio host in 2006, and I remember this story because I remember like my parents getting really mad about this, but that was when Keith Ellison in Minnesota, right? He's congressman in Minnesota. Yeah, when he first got elected, he was going to be sworn in on the Quran, right? Because he's Muslim. Yeah. And Dennis Prager was like, that's bad, and I think he also compared it. He brought up 9/11, and he definitely compared it to somebody being sworn in on Mein Kampf.
Wow.
That's what he said. He said, this is the equivalent of that. Like, you have to swear in on the Bible. And he made this point, too, that, like, even, Jewish elected representatives always swear in on the Christian Bible, which is also just, like, patently not true. Because many of them have sworn on the Torah. Even many of our presidents haven't even fucking sworn in on the Bible.
Right.
But like that as a thing is like obviously aimed at like a particular conservative Christian audience who is going to, you know, be up in arms about the idea that like somehow, you know, you're disrespecting the Bible by not kissing it every day of your life or whatever. You know, like I want my president to just kiss the Bible before and after every speech, when he wakes up in the morning, when he goes to bed at night, you know.
I will mention too that I did see that in 2006, former New York City Mayor Ed Koch came out saying like, hey, what a piece of shit he was for saying that about Keith Ellison. I also should mention, as we should probably tie in bluegrass to every single episode to Eat the Rich.
Go
Ed
ahead.
Ed Koch was in the Country Boy music video for Ricky Skaggs, also featuring Bill Monroe.
Really?
Yeah, you should take a look. It's
Damn,
wonderful.
that's a good
Look
piece
that
of
up.
trivia.
Shane, would you like to watch that with me?
I got a lot of PragerU I got to catch up on before I get into that. I wonder if they have a video on bluegrass. I'm going to look it up really quick.
If they do, I'm gonna go ballistic.
That also, though, the like swearing in on the Bible stuff feeds into like another huge ideological strand of theirs, which is like American exceptionalism. And basically they say that they're like American nationalists, which is, and one of their, I mean, we'll talk about the funders at a certain point, but one of their primary funders is like a foundation that funds like efforts to promote American exceptionalism. That is their purpose.
There's not enough non-profit regulation.
I wonder how that manifests. That's interesting.
Yeah. What's crazy about that is the this idea that American exceptionalism is not the dominant culture. Like they're always portraying themselves as the underdog. And it's like, look at the fucking Avengers movies. It's like the most popular media product in the last decade, and it's written through all of that. But it always has to be this crafted like victimhood thing, which of course is then what they always ascribe to the people that they're attacking. Right? They're like, oh, you're doing the oppression Olympics, or you're constantly complaining about being a victim when you should really be trying to get ahead. And like the entire grift is to be like, you know, we're being silenced. We, you know, our ideas are being suppressed or whatever.
We can talk about this at some point, but something I've been thinking about a lot is like, I don't know how to articulate this properly, but like this kind of like weird law of opposites, that like the people that feel the most persecuted are like white supremacists who like have the privilege and the supremacy, and like America, who is always feels like they're attacked or no one's pulling their weight, are the ones that are like the dominant imperial force in the world. It's like those, you know, the guys that have the lifted truck and the truck nuts and stuff and the Punisher decal in the back of the cab is like the people that feel like are the most insecure.
Yeah, literally the most protected group of people across all of history.
Exactly.
You know, like stretching back from the beginning of time, like the most safe, well-fed, and armed people like in history are just constantly paranoid.
Yeah. Obviously, we can like tie that into like, you know, we've talked about this in a previous episode of like white mediocrity and like black excellence and shit like that. That's just it falls in line with that same thing.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the whole, like, if you look at the waves of these culture wars, quote unquote culture wars, it's such a dumb term, but it's so predictable that all of this backlash always happens. It was like first after the New Deal, and then after civil rights, and then after affirmative action. And it's always these waves where it becomes this kind of panic on the right, and you see their talking points shift, and you see kind of money flowing in to help change the conversation. And like PC culture is something that, it's wild to me how little that conversation has changed since the 80s and early 90s. Like that got developed by right-wing think tanks and pushed by Dinesh D'Souza, who is still part of this whole system and is like an active player in it. And it was a response to affirmative action.
Especially even more amplified nowadays after after Obama, after the first black president. I mean, that's been the big one.
That was when PragerU started, right? It was like right in the beginning of the Obama administration.
2009, yeah, probably a direct reaction.
Interesting timing for sure. Raises some questions.
Becca, I wanted to ask you a question based off of pick up on a thread that you were pulling at right there, which is that like as part of this victimhood kind of narrative that a YouTube channel like PragerU and many of the guests who appear on PragerU, if it's not explicitly said there, you know, in their other books and their talks, like their whole kind of media personality is constructed around like we're the underdogs, we're the people like left out of culture. culture or whatever. I mean, you've written about how, you know, there's kind of two elements to this, right? There's like, on the one hand, it's this manufactured authenticity, which is something that is like very specific to online spaces, right? You have to like appear like you're just a regular guy, and we kind of talked a little bit about that. But then, of course, simultaneous to that, you know, all of the people, certainly on PragerU, but across the spectrum, right, are like tend to come from like these highly developed professional backgrounds, and they're flooded with money outside. Like, so the whole premise of them being, you know, underdogs is just like not the case.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's so much of it does relate to internet culture, and like a lot of this feeds into YouTube culture more broadly too, right? Because YouTube always positioned themselves as an alternative to the mainstream media, right? Where like the legacy media is the dominant one, and it's YouTubers who are kind of just like flying by the seat of their pants, like, you know, the underdogs just trying to get their content out there. And you even see that with like PewDiePie and his like moments of anti-Semitism and like big media blow-ups, right? Like, it gets positioned still by his fans as like, PewDiePie's the underdog here because he's just a YouTuber, and it's the entire legacy media that's out to get him. And yet it's all of these people who kind of have, or even aside from the YouTube stuff, you have this narrative being constructed that like, yeah, the hardest thing to be in the world right now is a Christian, white, conservative,
good fucking
straight,
God,
cis dude, right? So like one of the like, I think most classic, I wrote about this in my research, one of the most classic examples of this is Candace Owens, who used to go by Red Pill Black, who now has a show through PragerU where she interviews people. But her very first video that she ever posted to YouTube was this like spoof of her coming out to her parents as gay, and she like played both herself and her parents, and she was like, "Mom, Dad, I'm gay," and they were like, "Oh, we love you, honey, that's great," and then her being like, "And I'm conservative," and them like kicking her out of the family. Basically, it's like a way of saying like it's harder to come out as conservative than it is to come out as gay, and that has become like a giant talking point. So there's all of these things. I mean, it also feeds into like the long-standing positioning that like Fox has had. Fox always positions itself against like the liberal elite mainstream media, right? Even as it's the most watched cable channel.
They're in fucking Midtown Manhattan, in, like, part of News Corp, one of the most funded shits in the world, hosted by a bunch of fucking idiot Fauntleroys. Sorry, I'm just screaming.
Well, even to PragerU's specific like victimhood thing. I mean, we were just taking a look right before we started recording at the their annual report from 2019, and one of the big pages of their annual report is their lawsuit against Google and YouTube.
Oh my god!
Because they perceive themselves as being like, you know, like all the other online conservatives and stuff, being like, oh, these liberal Silicon Valley companies are trying to suppress us, and so they've actually opened up a lawsuit.
Fucking idiots.
Well, that probably is the most relatable thing about them too, like even their individual, you know, even their individual viewer, because like every single, like, this is like even your average regular conservative person online has this like complex where they believe they're being like shadow banned, or they believe their voices being restricted in some sort of way. They all believe that.
If there has been one individual that's been harmed by like coastal elite liberals and like large corporations, it's Chris.
It's me, goddamn.
If you want to get in on that PragerU lawsuit, become another defendant.
I'm gonna be coming in 2020. It's gonna be my own 5-minute PragerU contribution video about the time I was blackballed by the elite Starbucks corporation.
You do the Dave Rubin one where it's like, why I left the left.
By the end of 2020, there will be a precedent that being a Muller Dad 69 is a protected class.
To this point too, I wanted to pick up on this because I didn't know about this until I was just reading it here in this report. But I don't know if you guys saw this, Rebecca. You might already know about this Prager Force.
I was curious about that.
Me.
So Prager Force, I'm just gonna read it from it here because it's really funny to me.
Okay, good. Yeah, I want this explained better.
Okay, all right. So this is part of their report. It just says Prager Force. Prager Force is a group of students in America and around the world who represent PragerU on campus, spreading our content online. In 2019, we have increased our Prager Force presence to 1,500 college and high school campuses. Currently, almost 6,500 students are enrolled in our program. We aim to enlist 10,000 Prager Force members by the end of 2020. What's so special about Prager Force? Whenever we catch wind of the left colluding to deplatform our content, we initiate a swarm of Prager Force members who fight back online by upvoting our videos, reposting our censored content, or simply defending our ideas online. So they're literally just institutionalizing the troll method of like brigading to be like, we're gonna pay kids to like repost anytime, or if you post, if Chris does a very normal post that says PragerU sucks shit and is awful, a Prager Force member will be there as a first responder to be like, no sir, actually, did you know Democrats were racist?
Oh, jeez. Can you imagine these kids on campus? Can you fucking imagine them?
I wonder if I can get a gig doing that, and they can pay me, and I can like monkey wrench it somehow.
Get in on the grift.
Yeah. We are not recommending that anybody who listens to this podcast seek out Prager Force representatives or try to join Prager Force, try to get money that they can while they can, and attempt to offer differing perspectives as a member of the Prager Force. Change it from the inside.
No.
It is not a recommendation.
Don't do that.
I will just say, to go back to the Google lawsuit, that there's something incredibly weird and interesting to me watching these largely libertarian creators or small government creators ultimately coming to the conclusion that these big businesses have too much power and control over their lives. It's just incredibly ironic and weird, and has ended up weirdly having them at times you'll see them kind of hinting towards the need for government regulation, and it just is very, very strange.
Yeah, it's always fun when you see especially the incredibly free market fundamentalists, libertarians kind of roundabout invent on their own terms basic premises of a social structure government. I mean, this is unrelated, but I remember this is just in my own very non-academic, just purely masochistic scrolling through r/libertarian and other spaces. I remember there's this one post about talking about how to do transit in a libertarian society, and it was a huge long thread, and they eventually came to this conclusion that the most optimal thing to do would be for everybody to voluntarily pay into a pool so that they could carpool together as opposed to driving, and that in order for them to carpool most effectively, they should design new types of vehicles that could hold more than 8 people at a time. And it's it took you fucking idiots 10 hours of angry screaming at each other at fucking Reddit to invent buses.
And was this Reddit started by Elon Musk?
Idiots.
But the college campus stuff too is interesting because this also has been, so many of these are old tactics that they're just revamping. This is an obsession of mine. It's mid 20th century stuff that has been super effective and has pushed public discourse so far to the right, and that they just keep doing it again and again. And one of the things is kind of trying to target college campuses specifically by claiming that college campuses are too liberal, and then pushing them to the right, discrediting gender studies and race studies programs, starting up student youth groups, right? The Young Americans for Liberty, that was a 1960s effort to counter the lefty free speech movement on college campuses. And now you have, what is it? Prager Force? Prager Force.
Yeah, TPUSA, very much the same type of thing.
Toilet paper USA.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
By the way, I just discovered one of the tactics of Prager Force is to use the hashtag Prager Force. Please do not look up the hashtag Prager Force.
Don't do that.
Responding to
Don't take it over.
It's not funny to do that at all.
No.
I want to make that very clear.
Publicly disavow it.
I excuse myself from this part of the podcast.
I mean, again, I think like, you know, another component of it, and this specifically gets into that element of like the, you know, the youth mobilization, right? Or the, I mean, you know, the figures I was just reading, they're obviously, those are their like internal propaganda figures. This is the document that they send out to the variety of people who donate insane amounts of money to PragerU to spread its message. And I do want to eventually kind of get around to that and
Absolutely.
why there's so much money behind such a bald-faced, stupid fucking project is this. But part of the idea of like mobilizing students in that way, right, is to create, similar to how, you know, authenticity is manufactured. It's to create this illusory notion that there's some kind of like grassroots movement for these ideas. The idea that like this is actually like a bottom-up movement of like, you know, conservatives on campuses all over the place are, you know, are feeling this organically, and they're coming together, as opposed to being like not only a highly directed, but in this case like literally funded operation where people are being paid to, you know, either engage in this kind of like online dating stuff, or obviously produce and like work within these videos. But and it goes again, you know, to something like TPUSA as well, where it's like everybody who works for them like gets a certain amount of money.
Well, it's like the whole Tea Party movement that sprung up at the same time, you know, as a whole. I mean, basically completely funded by dark money in one way or another.
And the interesting thing about all of that I think I'm actually working on like research where I'm kind of exploring this right now, but there is like the scholarship on the Tea Party has shown that there were genuine grassroots elements to it, right? Like there were reactionary upper middle class retired white people who were super angry and wanted to do something about it, and they genuinely started Tea Party organizations in their towns and were like doing grassroots organizing efforts. But they also were given money from Americans for Prosperity, and you know, were provided with buses to go to the Capitol, and there was this real symbiotic relationship, right? So it was like they were able to maintain that like populist element because there was enough there, like it wasn't fully astroturfed, but there was a lot of money and encouragement and kind of guiding force, like a guiding hand provided from the top. And you get the same exact thing here. It's like, you know, so my favorite example of this on YouTube is, do y'all know like Christina Hoff Sommers?
No.
I'm familiar somewhat.
She's kind of like a Dinesh D'Souza figure, but like claims like because she's a woman, she can say all this factually inaccurate stuff about feminism. So she claims that like the wage gap isn't real. And she had this like series on YouTube through American Enterprise Institute, like the right-wing think tank, where she called herself the factual feminist and would make all of these videos. And this was in like 2013, 2014. And during Gamergate, she made these videos that were like, are video games sexist? And she said no, surprise, surprise. And then Sargon of Akkad, the like reactionary YouTuber, got super excited about it. And I think he was like using her research to try to claim that like the wage gap wasn't real. And so him and his followers started calling her based mom. And he made like this video kind of thanking her and like asking her to continue with the Gamergate movement and stuff, right? So you have these like just random kind of populist reactionary elements, and then you have kind of the funded elements, and they just like are really symbiotic, right? Like she got Gamergate cred and he got kind of like intellectual standing.
It took me a second to remember when you were speaking who Christina Hoff Sommers is, and then I remember that first time I saw her was in a PragerU video. That's the one that's like the war on boys.
Oh,
right?
Oh,
yeah, and that's the one where like the opening graphic is it's like her looking really sternly and angrily into the camera, and next to her is a text box that says like, being a normal boy is a serious liability in today's classroom.
Fucking amazing.
Which is so funny because it's like, you know, I am an extremely normal boy. Okay, like I am so fucking normal, and I am just such a liability.
Can we talk about a few of the videos, because talk about the war on boys thing?
Yeah, I've been waiting to. Let's just do it. Yeah, let's do it.
It's just, I don't know. I thought about this. I've been listening to a podcast that I can't recommend enough, which is called Capitalism Hits Home by Dr. Harriet Fraud.
I just started listening to that yesterday.
Dude, it's honestly
excellent.
One of my the underdog of like podcasts. Yeah. I think it's my favorite podcast. I'm such a huge fan of it. It's part of the Democracy at Work kind of family of stuff. Shout out to Richard Wolff, come on the show unironically. But I mean, what's weird about the war on boys thing is that, like, I think it's like tugging at a grievance that a lot of men have, right? And boys, boys that are kind of developing their worldview have. Boys to men, that Philly sound, because they kind of just blindly say that boys and masculinity writ large have been persecuted. But what Dr. Harriet Fraud talks about, and I was re-listening to this today because after I saw this war on boys thing, I was just like, the fuck? And it's interesting. Dr. Harriet Fraud has this thing, 2-part series called something like What's Going On with American Men. And so they talk about that wages for a white male in America had risen from 1820 to 1970, but like everything since the 1970s, it's gone to shit. Since 1970, the wages have remained entirely flat. And as it stands today, she reports that only 5% of jobs in the United States can support a family, meaning a spouse and dependents and whatnot. Now you need 2 wages to support a household, hopefully, obviously. And what PragerU does fucking acrobatics around. We were talking about that, Shane, you brought up that term before we started recording, about like they just do these acrobatics around these larger themes because they dance around the fact that since the 1970s, it is expressly the fault of capitalists that they've followed their profit motive and find lower wage workers globally and move jobs largely to the east and to countries with minimal or no environmental or labor regulations in order to pay lower wages for similar work. So the reason that this propaganda machine, PragerU, put out this video on that is to harness that, this is just my interpretation, but like harness that grievance that is a very real grievance and just direct it away and just say like it's some gender war or you're being held back by your mom or whatever.
But you gotta come up with some explanation for it if you don't have class consciousness. And if you want to divert people's attention away from class consciousness, you got to come up with some other explanation for it.
Class consciousness, if the working class, as we are like starting to gain our class consciousness, but if we had like a perfect class consciousness, like I don't even think PragerU would exist, right? Like I don't know like where the space would be for them to get in there. But anyway, the war on boys sucks ass. The video.
Dwight has come out against the war on boys. He supports traditional boys doing traditional boy stuff.
Boy
just
Scouts.
boys being boys.
Someone think of the normal boys.
I have to mention as a side note that in the Capitalism Hits Home, she talked about how there was this researcher who was like, yeah, companies are going to use woke capitalism as their marketing strategy for 2019, 2020, and they're going for it. And she cited the Gillette commercial, which was just like, is this the best the man can get? I can't do it, man.
to the whole like threatened masculinity thing. There was this video from last year that I saw it. I immediately I think I was even watching it before we had decided we were going to do this episode, and I just posted a bunch about it because it's so funny. And the name of it is "Make Men Masculine Again." And the whole premise of this, right, is it's a young woman speaking, and her whole premise is like, real women want real men, right? And
That's
so,
terrifying.
and by that is meant these like very traditional gender roles, right? But like the idea is that like these weak feminist poisoned men are like no good for women in the end. And like what women really want, and the graphic just sums it up again it's the same stupid aesthetic. It's like this picture of a guy wearing like the pussy hat from the Trump inauguration protest, and he's wearing a shirt that says like the future is female, and he's really sad because he's right next to a woman who's getting married to apparently 3 separate men, one who is a soldier, one who is a businessman, and one who is a construction worker.
The hell of a guy right there.
And but the actual content of the video, and again, this shows like the simplistic way that they kind of like, you try to use these common sense words or these little turns of phrases to like make something clear. Is the whole idea is that all of these attributes that we're told are toxic masculinity, like violence, greed, and ambition, actually these are good things. and the premise is literally, and they show this in graphics, it's like, the same attributes that start wars are also the attributes that help stop tyranny. and it does this like little like flip back and forth. So like the first graphic is like
values, it's all fun.
Yeah, it's like the first graphic is like a bunch of tanks rolling in, and then the second graphic is like an Iwo Jima thing, and it's like even within the context of that argument, it's circular logic, because you're saying like, it's literally what we, in order to stop a bad guy with toxic masculinity, we need a good guy with toxic masculinity.
I think it's just overlooked that what all women want are a man who is completely incapable of communicating his emotions. That's what they want to return to.
Yeah, just traditional values.
Yes.
Well, that's the other thing. They along with like so many other YouTubers, like I can only imagine the number of hours on YouTube that have been devoted to asserting that there are only two genders, right? Like there's an obsession with that.
Mm-hmm. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and PragerU has videos on it, I think multiple ones. And of course, like a lot of it comes back to this like biological essentialism, right? This idea that like, no, men actually are in higher positions in society and hold power over women and patriarchal capitalism because there are real differences between men and women. And of course, that's like, they don't get into this stuff in PragerU, but like the next step of that is IQ eugenics shit, right? That like is like actually there are biological differences between the races too, and this is why there's poverty within black communities and so on and so forth.
You don't even have to like. There's so much of that content on YouTube, but you don't even have to search it out. Like the algorithm just like it's like, oh, I see you watched this video on architecture. Would you like to now watch Ben Shapiro own gender neutral bathrooms? Like that's like they'll just recommend you that stuff for based on nothing.
Yeah. I had to just share this because it came up when I was watching that video again, and I sent it to you guys. It's just a graph where there's no Y and X axis, but it's like a jagged line that goes from left to right, and it's like masculine to feminine, and it shows that over time, presumably society has become more feminine. I don't understand what it's trying to represent.
It represents cold hard facts, man. You can't argue with that.
Yeah, that's just the data. That's
the data.
That's data.
Yeah.
Data doesn't lie.
It just
Becca, do you have a favorite PragerU video?
Oh God, where to start? I should have gone through some of the old ones because there were some old gems, but I mean, there's a couple of classics. One is about, and I tweeted about this one earlier today, but like, what is the alt-right? Because that one often shows up pretty highly in search results for the alt-right. And their argument is that it is an alternative to traditional conservative, much like the left is an alternative to traditional conservatism, and therefore the alt-right and the left actually have more in common than conservatives.
Yeah.
They're just doing horseshoe theory, like that's what they're asserting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, it's like the centrist bullshit about like, we don't pay attention to race. It's these other identitarians on both sides that pay attention to race. There's also the one about Charlottesville, right, where they say that Trump wasn't actually praising Nazis.
Yes.
Shane, this is what you were talking about, the fucking acrobats that they did to dance around this shit.
Yeah. Well, because so the idea of this one, right, and I think it's called the Charlottesville Lie.
Oh, no.
Which is fantastic.
Up,
I mean, it's
so
right up there with like, getting stabbed in the back by the Treaty of Versailles. Like it's that level of like just framing. And the idea is, and it's like a CNN guy they have on, and
it wasn't
like,
Niall Ferguson, was it?
No, it's not Niall Ferguson.
But he did do one, but his was about becoming becoming an American citizen.
Oh, I'm sure that's great.
Oh, okay. Did
Thank
he become
you,
an American
Scottish
citizen?
man, for telling us how easy it is to become an American citizen.
Right, exactly. There's a right way to do it, guys, and it's the Niall Ferguson way.
But yeah, the Charlottesville Lie thing is like, the whole premise is that, the media lied about Trump saying that he praised neo-Nazis. And like, that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, even the Trump media cycle has moved on far beyond that. So why even like, it seems like such a weird thing considering, as you had mentioned earlier, like, one of the reasons why they've kind of flown under the radar is avoiding the Trump stuff.
Yeah.
But it seems like now they might be reviving some of it. Maybe I was thinking that it could be like a lead up to 2020 of program. Like now we have to kind of, not directly endorse him or talk about him, but sort of like talk around him and, set the stage so that like we make sure that this guy is still considered a palatable conservative candidate.
It was interesting too because Prager was initially a Cruz guy, I think. At the very least, he was like explicitly against Trump.
He thought Trump was a bit too vulgar, a bit too coarse.
Yikes.
Exactly. And then once Trump became the nominee, somehow he managed to revise that position and decided that like Trump's personal life should be handled separately from his political life, and therefore it didn't matter.
Well, I think that the way he presented it was that like when given the binary choice of like holding your nose and voting for Trump or Hillary Clinton and the destruction of Western civilization, literally I think this is the way he framed it.
Right,
Here's to hoping.
It's an easy choice to make.
Right. That's right. I think he did the classic like, well, Democrats are a cancer on society, and therefore we're all gonna rot and die if
Where's the lie?
Hillary wins. Therefore,
Where's the lie?
I mean, that also speaks to, like, again, as we talked about, ostensibly the whole appeal of PragerU is that it's, it's very, like, neutral and easygoing, and it doesn't delve into, like, super extremist thought. But, like, if you actually interrogate any of the ideas that are being put forward on some of these videos, they're, like, insane. Yeah. I mean, another one that I stumbled across the other day, and I shared it with you guys, and I showed it to you, Becca, too. There's this one that's called, like, Why You Should Be a Nationalist. And one of the still images from it is just like, Hitler wasn't a nationalist. He was actually a globalist, much like the left today.
Fucking acrobats.
And he said, which also Candace Owens had said,
right.
I forget if that was even this year, where he said the line, like, if Hitler had just stayed in Germany to make Germany great again, it wouldn't have been a problem.
right. His problem was going global.
Yeah. His problem was when he invaded other countries. What he did in Germany was fine.
They do fucking acrobats to get around this shit. They're like fucking the Catherine Zeta-Jones and Entrapment, like going through the lasers and shit, like to try to avoid the clear fallacy that they run into. Can I please talk about the capitalism versus socialism video?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Please.
Is this the Steven Crowder one?
No. This was
Because I watched one he did last night. I guess it was what's the problem with democratic socialism? I think that was the one Crowder did.
Well,
Got us.
oh shit.
Fuck,
you
I'm
guys
so wrecked,
figured
dude.
out-
I can't. How will I ever recover?
You guys figured out we just threw that word in there to like throw you off for like a little while.
Yeah.
Now this one was presented by Andy Puzder.
Oh God, yes, I watched one of his.
So side note, at some point we should probably do a follow-up to the Pizza Zealots episode and
Absolutely.
do one on burgers. We should do Andy Puzder, who he was the CEO of the group.
Carl's Jr. Hardee's. CKE
Yeah, exactly.
group, I think.
Yes, correct. But something I've been thinking about a lot when like watching the videos and like other places that do videos on like capitalism versus socialism and propaganda for capital, the thing that I keep coming back to and thinking about is no one explains the problems of capitalism better than capitalists describing what they think the problems with socialism is. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
so like everything that they say, if socialism comes around, this is the problems you're going to deal with, and then they deftly explain everything that's wrong with capitalism, but they just say it's socialism at the end. So, for instance, in the video, he says, in a socialist economy, the government has the ultimate power. It decides what you get from a limited supply that it decides should exist. Instead of millions of people making millions of decisions about what they want, a few people, government elites, decide what people should have and how much they should pay for it. And I'm like, yeah, that's what capitalism is. That's exactly how capitalism works. I agree with you up to the point that you said that it was socialism.
Well, the one I watched with Andy Puzder last night, which like made me even do like a couple tweets about it, but like it was why a $15 an hour minimum wage won't work. Like, let's ask the multimillionaire owner of Carl's Jr. fast food restaurant chain.
Your tweet was so good. Now I know where that came from.
Yeah.
That's the other thing too, right? We're like just across the board with all of their videos, when they have people come on, right? The idea is like, here are these neutral or intellectual figures, and when you actually look at who these figures are, of course some of them are like just like pundits and stuff, but a lot of them, like the one I mentioned before, it was called like Why You Should Love Fossil Fuels, was presented by a guy who owns and runs some like think tank thing called like the Americans for Capital Industry or something. Like that's literally the name of it. Yeah. It's like, of course he's gonna have an unbiased view on why we need to like frack the planet.
So maybe that might be a good way to transition into, like you said, they got one video called, why you're supposed to love fossil fuels. Like fossil fuels, I don't know if you noticed, but if you do a YouTube search for PragerU climate change, I believe they hit you over the head with like, I counted like 19 different videos. There's probably more, but those were just the ones that came up with that very simple search. So Becca, I'm wondering if maybe the people who are funding PragerU might have a vested interest in people denying climate change and stuff like that.
Curious.
Yeah, it does make you wonder, and let me grab my notes just a second. I forget what these dudes' names is. Yeah, okay, so one interesting thing actually about PragerU is that it's a nonprofit, which is pretty unusual in the YouTube sphere. Like a lot of times, right, like people talk about the grifters who are in it for the money. Dennis Prager explicitly set this up as a nonprofit because he wanted people to know he wasn't in it for the money. He was in it for the ideology, which, I mean, one of the weird and troubling things about YouTube is you can never quite tell the difference between the two, right? Like, in most cases, it's probably a combination of both, that people are believing the stuff that they're spreading and they're in it for some level of fame or whatever. You do get people like Dave Rubin who are just, like, obviously pure grifters, but there's often a combination. But with the nonprofit model, you get a lot of funders from these right-wing foundations. This one in particular, the biggest funders are the Wilkes brothers, who, interestingly enough, are billionaires through being petroleum industry tycoons.
Curious. Curious.
I'll be damned.
And they run their own church.
Yes. Yes. What was it called? The Israeli Messianic Jewish Messianic Assembly or something?
Yeah, something like that. What? And they also co-founded the Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro's thing. So they're like big in the YouTube game. The other big one is the Bradley Foundation, which is that one that's like devoted to promoting American exceptionalism. And then there's like a range of smaller ones. Many like Donors Trust is one that is largely funded by Koch brothers, so you get a little Koch money in there. But it's all of these groups that are able to provide like vast amounts of money to the production and dissemination of this. And I think they said they spend like some absurd percentage on marketing of their videos. Like that's why they can promote them.
Yeah, it's almost half. It's almost half
of their operating budget.
Yeah, it's wild. And then each video apparently costs like $30,000 to make.
Absurd.
Who the fuck are they paying?
Yeah.
I know.
Like the one thing that capitalists are good at.
Where does the money go? Where does the money go?
The one thing the capitalists are good at is exploiting workers. Then all of a sudden they need to put together fucking $30,000 video
for a slideshow.
Yeah.
Slideshow.
We could easily put our show together for a mere $10,000 a month. Subscribe to our Patreon when it eventually launches. Please, said did buddy if you have any.
Cash App, guys.
Each podcast episode will cost a mere $30,000.
That's it. That's all we're asking for.
Nothing to worry about.
If we can take just 1% of the Patreon community, then we'll be fine.
No, I was just gonna say that like it's interesting because it's the same foundations are then funding these think tanks who are producing these like quote unquote scholars who often are the people that come speak on the PragerU videos. So they create their entire like production of data and knowledge like within this little community that reinforces each other, all funded by these billionaires, right? So it's just like if you look at any number, like you were talking about the fossil fuels guy, right? Like I went and looked at his foundation. Again, it's funded by Koch money, and a bunch of the same foundations. It's just, it's kind of these self-reinforcing things.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, we talked a little bit about it on last week's show when we were talking about the ham man fracking billionaire with Adam. And Anita actually also mentioned the Wilkes brothers, and that was originally one of the reasons why we thought about doing today's topic is talking about them a little bit. And I think, on that episode, we talked about how in a capitalist enterprise, right, like you have profit and loss, like you look at your spreadsheet, like what are you giving money to, and the goal and the reason why these guys, especially with like a nonprofit, like when you set up an organization like this that is ostensibly a nonprofit, right, like when you give money to that, you can make that seem like this big philanthropic move, right, like, oh, we're giving money away to this educational resource of blah blah blah, but at the same time it is also direct PR. Like in the case of the Wilkes brothers, they're like, if you're putting out content that denies climate change or says like actually fracking is really good for the economy, especially when you frack with toxic masculinity or whatever the fuck video that they have about it, right, there is a capitalist motivation behind it, right, and that also dispels some of this idea that these are just like, we're totally neutral. I was going to read from some of this, but I decided it was too boring to not. I looked into one of Prager's books about the Bible, where he does like an annotated notes on Exodus, and his whole introduction in there, his whole thing is like, my whole life I wanted to make people be better, which like, that's a fair amount of hubris or whatever, right? Like, but the way he presents himself is like, I'm doing this like purely because I think this is the right thing to do, purely because I think it's good, purely because I think if I get these values out here in the free marketplace of ideas, like these will improve people's lives, it will make people happier and better, which is another point that they hammer in the fucking video about his biography, where it's like he makes people's lives better. But it's not purely motivated by that, right? Like, it's the only reason why it can exist is because there are people who do things to make money, and they see him as like, oh, if you promote these values, it'll help us, in this case, like change public opinion about climate change, or maybe like change public opinion about like a tax change that we want to do. So it's not like the ideology is at all separated from the economic motivation, even though that's how they present it.
Totally. And in fact, I mean, this is like an explicit strategy. Sorry, I'm such a history nerd these days. I'm like, let's go back to the 1970s again. But it's
You're in the right place for that.
Like, the Powell Memo was and it wasn't even the first time that this got stated, but this was like a guy that eventually became a Supreme Court justice who explicitly said to like free enterprise interests, like, we need to develop academic literature and get a foothold in universities to help promote smaller government and free enterprise. And so they basically created this entire academic, this think tank complex that was explicitly meant to like push out research that was in their interests.
Why didn't they just compete fairly in the marketplace of ideas? Was it because their ideas sucked and everybody fucking hated them by the 1970s?
Great irony.
Speaking of the people who give money to Prager, because again, I was trying to find it. Some of it is like obfuscated, but there's a little bit of like a Q&A kind of information you can get from just some of their own internal literature. So in their that 2019 annual report, they have like the various like stages of like funding you can give.
Oh, I love this.
So
I love this. I love this.
I'm just going to read them out because the names are great. So Club 1, that's like the lowest tier of giving. That's $1,000 to $5,000 annual gift. A benefactor, that's $5,000 to $10,000. A Micah, I'm assuming that's a biblical reference. I don't know why it's called that. That's $10,000 to $25,000. Influencers, $25,000 to $50,000. Producers, $50,000 to $100,000. And founders, $100,000 or more. And I also looked into they have a summit,
dude,
a yearly summit.
I want to go.
I want to go. Yeah, I know. I was gonna say my immediate instinct is let's go, and then again I looked at the price tag for attending this event. So we really got to get that Patreon started. But so their 2019 summit, which is billed here on their site as a spiritual and intellectual retreat.
I need that.
It was at the Ritz-Carlton in Santa Barbara. General admission is $1,500, and if you're already a club member, so I guess if you're already giving tens of thousands of dollars, it's only $1,400.
Nice.
What a steal, man.
So here are the extra gimmies you can do to, like, if you give them a lot of money to go to the summit. Here are the things you can get. All right, I'm gonna read them.
Oh, no.
So for $100,000, you get a Saturday lunch with Jordan Peterson.
Oh. No vegetables allowed.
$65,000, a Friday night dinner and Kabbalat Shabbat service. That's what Dennis Prager will be there personally.
Oh dear.
$50,000 gets you to the live fireside chat, and I do
my
want to talk about
God.
his fireside chats a little bit. This is my favorite one. $35,000 gets you Bible study with Dennis Prager.
Oh no.
Like one time or like regularly?
Oh
or?
no.
Yeah, just one time. $25,000, you get to go to the Prager Force breakfast. So if you're one of the young people, all you have to do is pony up $25,000, and I guess you get to go hang out with the other influencers. And then it's all shit like that. The rest of it is not as funny. It's like Sunday breakfast, sponsorship, blah blah blah.
Let me say, to the listener, all you got to do is contribute to our Patreon, and you can hang out with far more important influencers like us every week.
Yeah. Chris will eat lunch with you for $10, dude.
Chris, this is for you, man. You got to go to the Big Tech Censorship Dinner, where they talk about a riveting discussion about big tech censorship from insiders who have seen firsthand the Silicon Valley blacklist and the proof that suppression of conservative content is real. I know it's you. I'm gonna be. I guess this is the time for me to announce that I've received the invitation. I'm gonna be Carpe Dunctum's +1 at the 2020 White House social media summit. I like how they boast that they have over like 3 billion views and then say that suppression of conservative content is real in the same breath.
Right.
It's such a tightrope they're walking.
It doesn't matter, right? Like, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, they don't have to be philosophically clean.
Right.
That's not what the point of what they do is. Like, this is not hardcore academic shit. This is proper fucking ganda.
I don't know, the graph on masculine to feminine society I thought was pretty well researched.
Pretty compelling.
I mean, you guys know, as Becca and Shane, as academics, you should know that it's never important to cite your sources, especially on graphs.
No, what? No. Are you kidding me?
In fact, better if you don't. Just
anybody
exactly.
that listens to Eat the Rich knows that anecdotal evidence is as important or more important than falsifiable, quantifiable data. That's extremely important to know.
The top video, I haven't watched this one because I cannot bring myself to do it. But when you go to their channel, the top video is just called "What is the Enlightenment?"
Oh, I was just watching that one. They just published that.
That's the really heady, like, logic fetishism bullshit where it's like,
Sure, that's the Jordan Peterson type stuff.
Okay, but I got an
Yeah.
M. Night Shyamalan twist for you because they are anti-enlightenment in that video.
oh yes, yes. Yes!
I'm just doing the
expecting.
thing, like, you know, when dogs like cock their heads from side to side just to try to fucking figure out what the fuck they're hearing and seeing.
Galileo was actually an SJW.
all of the people that get like celebrated from the Enlightenment actually stole their ideas from earlier conservative thinkers, and that all of the good stuff that people think came out of the Enlightenment actually came from conservatives, and all of the bad stuff that came out of the Enlightenment was what led to Marx.
Of course, yeah, right.
Famous Enlightenment philosopher Karl Marx.
I wonder, was Napoleon a product of the Enlightenment? It didn't come up in the Napoleon video. Maybe they'll have to do a follow-up.
Yeah, there you go.
I can't even fucking make sense of that one. Jesus God.
On the topic of like weird, like deep historical, because obviously like they do a lot of like historical stuff, like we've been talking about, where it's like, oh, the Democrats were the real racists, like, you know, bullshit that is like very like stupid and petty and narrow views of like the last 100 years of history. Occasionally they like delve into like, you know, older topics, like, you know, talking about these foundational ideas and everything. I mentioned before the Dennis Prager fireside chats. which are now like videos that he uploads to the channel, where it's just like, you know, him hanging out, being like a funny guy, and you know, you get to see how personable and nice he is, and he literally hangs out next to a fire. By the way, who came up with fireside chats? That was a notable conservative. Oh wait, never mind. Sorry, I had a lapse in reason there. But like most recently, and I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I cannot watch more than like 5 minutes of him talk because he's so boring. But like just recently, as one of our friends of the show, Mike, pointed out, he had like an epic takedown of fucking Anne Frank.
Oh fuck.
Where he was like, you know, he read something that Anne Frank wrote in her diary that was, you know, some kind of very vague, like empathetic, you know, universalist vision of like, why can't like all the peoples of the earth like live together peacefully? And his take was like, well, I don't listen to teenagers for moral guidance.
Oh my God.
I think it was literally her saying like, I believe humans at the core are good, and he was like, no.
Yeah, that was it. It was even more simple.
Even more offensive than that was what he said was, I don't get my wisdom from teenagers, but he said specifically because she was secular. Like if she was a more observant Jew, then she would have had some wisdom that she would have been able to impart.
Are you
upon
fucking
him.
kidding me?
Yeah.
Are you fucking kidding me? What the fuck is wrong with this fucking idiot?
She lived before Israel and therefore could not be a Zionist.
I'm sorry, Dwight.
Sorry.
We made it 2 hours without you getting really mad.
Fuck!
We were doing so well.
Fuck! Oh God!
I just am imagining now a YouTube like recommendation that comes up. It's like Steven Crowder destroys SJW and Frank with facts and logic.
I don't mean to, look, you know, again, since we have some academics with us, I don't want to resort to ad hominem, but I will.
It's very kind of you to call me an academic, Dwight. I appreciate it.
I just can't imagine being related to this guy. Like, I can't imagine being like a spouse to just getting gaslit to be like, well, actually, I actually did take out the trash, but you just failed to see the way in which I did it. Like, it was on purpose that I didn't replace the trash bag into the trash can after I brought it outside, because that was actually an opportunity to see what kind of trash bags we wanted to put into it.
By the way, Chris, you'll like this. The name of that fireside chat, because I did try to watch some of it for this. The name of that particular one was Just Say Merry Christmas.
Yeah. He's Jewish. Again, to clarify, he's Jewish.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And you know, Anne Frank, as she was being taken away, did not say Merry Christmas to the Wehrmacht soldiers who entered her house. And that's, that's just
I didn't want to get into this, but I fucking will. Because that shit just fucking pissed.
Cut his mic.
No, this shit fucking, it's like the most like disgusting, unbelievable, exploitative thing of like one of the worst things that humans have ever perpetrated against its own race ever, and fucking took it there. And I will bring this up too, that there was something I read on his Wikipedia that said Prager worked with Bob Dole's campaign in the 1996 presidential election to rally the Jewish vote for Dole, who had a strongly pro-Israel platform. It said when polls prior to the election showed that the effort had failed, he said it was because Jews are ignorant.
Yeah, I remember hearing that one as well. Well, wasn't there a PragerU video? And there's that clip that's circulated for years and been twisted around, the one of George Soros talking about that edited clip of him supposedly talking about helping the Nazis confiscate the property of Jews during the Holocaust. And yeah, I know PragerU they've circulated the video. I believe I wrote down the title of it here. It's George Soros admits he felt no guilt for helping Nazis confiscate the property of Jews during the Holocaust. For him as a Jew to be willing to spread that kind of propaganda about George Soros, which is
blatantly anti-Semitic. It falls exactly into anti-Semitic tropes.
I can't. I like it. It fucking it. Like I'm clenching my fist until like my nails bleed into my palm. But like it's just I cannot believe that he would literally take and use just generations of trauma and death for his just stupid fucking political ends, and just to be a weak leg of this shitty table of capitalism. Wow, man, had to wait till the end of the episode to get fucking fired up. God fucking damn it.
Dwight, can I just say one more thing?
Did you see the pop blood vessel in my eye?
Stay cool, Dwight.
Oh God.
I mean, I think in that vein, it is. Look, it's a simple critique to make, and sometimes it's like overly simplistic to say this. But on a basic level, any examination of this guy, his role, is just immensely hypocritical, because his whole presentation, his entire career has been about this like moral integrity bullshit, and the fact that he's like willing to do that, or willing to overlook the clear like moral vacuum that exists at like the part of the president or any other conservative policy. It's just an unbelievably unsquarable circle to combine all of those things together. And he's not the only one doing that. Obviously, that's a grift that's been going on forever. And he's not necessarily the most prominent one, but he is out there, and he's a despicable man.
Yeah, and to say that like so much of the framing of all of this is that like you've been indoctrinated by the left, right? Like you're now escaping your indoctrination, and at the same time literally bragging about how many minds they've changed towards conservative ends, right? Like they are literally attempting to indoctrinate people and are not shy about that fact. And yet are like clever in their framing, and so they can frame it as like, now you're thinking for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, that feeds again into the whole underdog idea. It feeds into these sets of grievances that are largely based on this false sense of entitlement, right? Where it's like, oh, I don't have the things in my life that I want. It must be the fault of these other people. It must be the fault of college SJWs or immigrants or, whatever the targeted group is, right? And the fact, we've talked about this a little bit, I believe, but there is something perhaps more insidious about these ideas being presented in a very clean, nice, sort of sanitized way, as opposed to the ones
to like an Alex Jones type,
right? Who are much more explicit.
Goblins.
And much, they kind of show a certain amount of rage
Demons.
and stuff. Yeah, and the goblins and demons, which are real, by the way. But to present it in this like hyper sanitized, euphemistic language in a way is not as visibly dangerous, but it sort of is more dangerous. There's various ways you can look at it. I'm not going to say something falsifiable. I'm going to be very bullshitty and say maybe it's more dangerous. Because again, just based on the anecdotal evidence that I gathered by talking to people, it seems like this is reaching young people. It is getting people who are maybe like kind of on the fence or haven't developed these ideas or just exploring their ideas online. And this is the material they're being exposed to, and it provides like these concise little sound bites that can substitute actual intellectual thought, right? It's all of the dumb gotcha bullshit that we see the right put out all the time, where it's like, well, what about Venezuela? Like, I mean,
Oh, you saw that video?
I'm just gonna do PragerU Venezuela.
Several of them.
Yeah, there's 6 of them immediately. I haven't even looked, But like, it's all of that just, compartmentalized and put into a more repeatable version to give people talking points to go out and argue this ideologically.
I appreciate you kind of putting that all together, because I was just sitting here trying to do some Vipassana breathing exercises to bring my heart rate back down. Because I would like to have a good night's sleep tonight.
We're here for each other, man.
Yeah.
Get it all out, bro.
Yeah.
It's cathartic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally cathartic to break blood vessels in my eye while recording my communist economics podcast.
Yeah. Out of respect for our guest, I will not say any of the actionable things I usually say when I get this kind of drug towards
We're going to have an easy job of...
Usually, to be fair, Shane, it's typically not you and I. It's typically Dwight that says the really actionable, controversial things.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you know me.
That's true. Yeah.
No, just a clean, pure academic analysis here, folks.
That's right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Everybody is welcome to peer review Eat the Rich. Especially everybody is especially welcome to peer review our Patreon content.
Dennis Prager, if you're listening, do a video about us. Do a 5-minute video about us.
Please do.
Why eating the rich is bad for your indigestion.
I assure you that this podcast is deleterious to anybody's digestion.
Oh, and again, on that same note, Lil Trump, if you're listening, where's our diss track?
Oh, yeah. Still waiting for the diss track.
Keep me out of it. I've had enough YouTube videos made about me.
Oh, Lord, yeah. Yeah, this is specifically an Eat the Rich Jordan Yule joint. That's, I think, we're the targets.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. There will be a 1-hour YouTube video uploaded in a month that's like debunking Alex Jones of the left, Becca Lewis's appearance on Eat the Rich. And it'll be like a guy in front of a antiquated map that no longer reflects even the real borders of Europe, spouting, what we said wrong.
She denounces harassment, and yes, she discussed Dennis Prager, therefore harassing him.
Well done, guys.
There's nothing worse than propagandists putting out their message and trying to consolidate it. Easy, repeatable sound bites that you can say to your family. Anyway, enjoy our podcast where we do that.
We do it.
And remember, folks, eat the rich.
Yeah.
What is this show really but just a long form of a PragerU video?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
Worse graphics.
We could, and maybe possibly might consider expanding into video. Maybe doing something on YouTube.
You're gonna see our extremely Hollywood-worthy faces.
Oh, we've already established that. Yeah.
I'm gonna say this right now, just as a leading towards a wrap up thing. Like, and Becca, we talked about this earlier. Like, this is not an ideological critique, but the actual aesthetics of PragerU just look like shit. They look awful.
Yeah.
They're terrible.
It reminds me.
Considering it costs
Something
$30,000.
that should have like just fucking like the ukulele music or something playing in the background. You know
Dude,
what I'm saying?
totally.
Right, like Kickstarter.
Totally.
Yeah.
That also, I was thinking about this when you were talking about the fireside chat. I think about this a lot with like him and Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro, that like they do the laziest, like most uncreative performances of masculinity, and like they very clearly are trying to be like, yes, I'm a masculine man, and so like Dennis Prager smokes a cigar, and it's like he's there with his dog, and he'll give the dog like a little pat every so often, but mostly he's smoking a cigar. And there's like a dude, Michael Knowles, who's been in PragerU videos and works for Ben Shapiro's outlet, who literally will wear like smoking jackets and will like broadcast these smoking jackets.
How old is this guy? Out of curiosity?
Oh, like 30 tops.
Oh, okay, of course. Yeah, I knew he was going to be on the young end. Yeah.
Yeah.
The kind of guy who carried a briefcase to high school.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
They're actually launching, and I wanted to mention this because I found this in the 2019 report. In 2020, they're launching a new series with Michael Knowles called The Book Club, where he's going to talk about books, the most important books of the canon that shaped Western civilization. So presumably they'll just be reading the Bible.
Some of Mike Huckabee's work.
Yeah, the other projects that they're launching, they're doing a co-partnership with the Project Veritas.
Oh my God.
Yeah. With James O'Keefe, and
They're
then
just gonna be dressed up like pimps for some reason, for no reason at all.
Yeah. And then the other show that they're like advertising that apparently is going to come, it says Q2 2020, is a show they're calling Americanos.
Oh no.
And it says this monthly series will give Hispanic voices from across the country a chance to share their American success stories and explain why they're conservative. Interestingly, they don't actually have a name attached to them.
Oh,
they
no.
do have a picture.
It's like, well, it all started when Castro took over my family sugar plantation.
Oh God.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's always some guy that's like, his last name is like,
Goebbels.
like Heinrich Batista. And it's like, the socialists came for me and there was nobody to speak for me or my family of like slave owning plantation owners.
I would like to challenge any one of the guys that are on PragerU that talk about masculinity.
Uh-oh.
to a lifting competition.
I will believe you're. If you can bench more than 315 like I can, then I will buy you some cigars.
Cut his mic. He's doing toxic masculinity. Cut his mic.
Forget it. Cut this. But just for your,
it's good.
But
It's
just for your,
keep it in,
for your
keep that
information.
in.
But like none of these guys, like they're.
Becca, are you impressed?
Oh, for 315, you say?
So anyway, I found some cool workout videos. Maybe you could like tell me if my form is good or.
Yeah.
Forget it.
You know what? I like it. I like
my
that,
God.
and I respect it, because there's nothing wrong with traditional displays of masculinity, and they want you to believe that people on the left think that. Right? That's not what people are upset about. It's about the toxic aspects of that.
I challenge any one of them to accurately describe why they're in a bad mood.
That's an even bigger challenge. Yeah.
That's
dead
good.
serious. Like I like
Absolutely.
Yeah, no,
because
that's good.
I was thinking about this, like, you know, when we talk about like what are kind of like the aspirational masculinity that we need for the next, you know, for the next generation, since like just most, if not all, of the traditional displays of masculinity are like completely destructive and bad and just alienate nearly everybody around you. And I think that that's like such a simple way to go about it, to like develop an understanding of yourself and an introspection, and to just reduce tension and fucking lengthen the life expectancy of general Americans. Like, there's a reason that men die before women. Just accurately describe why you're in a bad mood. It's a simple question to do, but like it is so fucking hard to do if you have grown up in a traditional patriarchal capitalistic society, because there isn't a space for you to describe. And, you know, things like, you know, Steven Crowder and Jordan Peterson and all that shit, and Ben Shapiro, I can not fucking imagine listening to a conversation between the three of those people and just like that are just doing those same acrobats because they could never describe themselves why they have the feelings that they do. And it's super important for us to be able to do that for the next generation. Otherwise, I mean, we're fucked for a variety of reasons. We are, but for this reason as well.
I mean, this is again like a probably unproductive, and you can cut this, like criticism or observation, but it's like these guys who are opining about like lost masculinity. Like, have you looked at them? You know,
some of the most overtly insecure people on planet Earth. If you're talking about masculinity in any other way than like, hey, this is really something I'm trying to work on, you're fucked. You're a fucking idiot. If you're just like, we need to preserve it, you don't have it, bro. Come talk to me about it.
And that's one of the things that gets me mad, because I legitimately do sympathize with. I think it's a tough time to be a young anyone, right? And that includes young men. And I think that there aren't enough positive, like constructive voices for young men kind of in the media spaces that they're in. And so I get it that like when someone like Jordan Peterson steps in and starts telling them like, get your room together, here are some steps for like getting your life together, like I sympathize with that. But then it's so insidious, because then he can take the next step and say, and you know what? The reason you're feeling so shitty is because of these feminists who are trying to steal everything from you.
Right. It's so insidious, like you're saying, because it is this like very valid, constructive self-help type stuff, like wrapped up in this awful, shitty ideology as well.
Right. I mean, if you watch that one video I was saying that was like about, you know, real women want real men, the conclusion of it is like, oh, I guess if you want to be a real man, you got to go die in a fucking foreign war. Like that's the conclusion. That's the idea, right? Like that's the only way to like express yourself.
So fucking dumb.
Stay
man.
cool, folks.
Stay cool, folks. Oh God. Starting off the year with a real uplifting message as usual. At least we're on brand.
Well, thank you so much, Becca, for coming and joining us to talk about, you know, one of the greatest institutions of American academia, PragerU. You know, I know you have some work of your own that is really fantastic. Would you like to kind of share it and give a sense to the listeners where they can check out some of your writing?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I have written quite a bit of research on far-right YouTubers, including but not limited to PragerU. Some of it is freely available online. If you go to the Data and Society website, I did research there. The report is called Alternative Influence, Broadcasting the Reactionary Right on YouTube. So even if you just Google part of that or my name, you can find it. It's free online in PDF form. And then my Twitter is at Becca Lewis, and I post the other stuff that I'm writing there.
So awesome. Obviously, it's a thrill to have you. Thank you for joining us, Becca.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. This was so much fun.
Oh, God. I'm going to go have a glass of Sambuca.
I'm going to go smoke a cigar in my smoking room.
I'm going to go eat some Wendy's in my car.
Oh, no.
I was thinking, like, as you were saying, like, there aren't a lot of, like, positive representations or sort of role models for young men. I was thinking just Chris.
Yes.
I mean, do what Chris does, you know?
Don't do what I do, folks.
Get banned on Twitter by a multinational coffee conglomerate.
Honestly, unironically, yes.
Thank you for your endorsement.
Masculinity.
Oh, stay cool, folks.
Peace out.
Old PragerU, to you is due our thirst for clarity. We first pursue what's really true. We need not first agree. That battle won, we've just begun a wider view to see. We stand with you, old PragerU, dear you.